Madam President. I'd ask the quorum call to be vitiated.
Not in a quorum call.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm so delighted that you're in the chair, Madam President, the senator from Nevada who has led this fight on the floor against this incredibly counterproductive measure that the senator from Florida has brought here. Incredibly, in the name somehow of being tough on China. This may be, I've seen lots of things on this floor that didn't make sense. I've seen lots of things where I've wondered about the judgment of people that were pursuing something allegedly in the interests of the American people, allegedly in the interests of American jobs, allegedly in the interests of manufacturing, allegedly because we're competing with China. I've never seen something as counterproductive as this. And I want to thank the presiding officer for her leadership because she comes from Nevada and I come from Colorado. And we know the jobs that are at stake here. Tens of thousands of jobs that could go away. $1 billion of tariffs, of taxes that our solar industry would have to pay as they're going out of business because of what the senator from Florida is trying to do in the name of being tough on the Chinese. So let's talk about that for a second. Let's think about who's actually being tough on the Chinese. You know, one of the benefits of the way the Chinese are organized is that, or they see it as a benefit, I don't see it as a benefit, but they do, is that they don't live in a democracy. They live in a totalitarian society. And in that totalitarian society, they can make 5-year plans. They can make 10-year plans. She can say, this is what we're going to do, you know, for the next 5 years. This is what we're going to do for the next 10 years. And I would argue that for the 20 years that we were spending fighting those 2 wars in the Middle East that we probably shouldn't have been fighting for those 20 years, the Chinese were marching along and marching along and marching along, stealing our intellectual property, developing new industries and new technologies. You know, and we had our eye off the ball. And one of the things that's hard about democracy is sometimes we can't really plan much longer than between 2 elections or 1 election, if we're really being pathetic. But recently, there's been a different approach here. Recently, there's been a different approach in the infrastructure bill that we passed a couple years ago that was bipartisan, was the first infrastructure bill of any significance since Eisenhower was our president. We finally said, you know what? We need to start investing in our country again. And all over Nevada, all over Colorado, Americans are working on our roads and bridges long overdue as a result of bipartisan work, Republicans and Democrats working together. There was another bill that we passed that was the semiconductor legislation, the so-called CHIPS Act. Some people remember, I certainly do, when I was in college, Ronald Reagan was the President of the United States, and back then, Madam President, for some reason, everybody thought that it was a good idea to ship everything to Southeast Asia to get it made there. Everything would be a good idea to ship it to China and have it made there. That's kind of what Ronald Reagan's view of the world was, and I regret the fact that we went down that road for decades. And now that CHIPS bill, that semiconductor bill, that is the first piece of legislation since Ronald Reagan was president that says, stop it. We're going to bring an industry back to the United States. We're going to bring the semiconductor industry back here. And by the way, I hope that's not the last. I hope that's only the first. But it sure made sense to start with semiconductors because 90% of the most important semiconductors in our fighter jets are made in Taiwan, 110 miles off the coast of China. 90% of the semiconductors in our surface ships and in our submarines and our submarines are made in Taiwan, 110 miles off the coast of China. What could possibly go wrong? And yet, Democrats and Republicans working together said, we're going to bring that back. Well, we had another bill, Madam President, that I regret didn't get any Republican votes. I wish that it had. I really do wish that it had, because that bill had 2 pieces. One was health care and one was energy. In the health care pieces, we cut drug prices for seniors. You know, we said we're going to cap them at $2,000. We said Medicare is going to negotiate drug prices on behalf of the American people for the first time. We capped insulin at $35 a month. Pretty amazing. And I'm sorry some people didn't vote for that, and I don't know exactly why, but the other part was an energy part. And here we were saying we're going to compete with China. And here we were saying we're going to lead the world in the transition that we're going to make from the fossil fuel economy that we have today to a clean energy economy, and that no country in the world is better situated to do that than the United States. Does that mean we can turn fossil fuels off tomorrow? No. Can we turn it off yesterday? No. You know, I, for one, believe it's going to be really important for this country to export LNG, liquefied natural gas, over to Europe to help keep Europe in the fight against Putin and to help replace Chinese coal. I think that's going to help us with emissions. Not everybody agrees with me on that. I believe strongly in that. And I don't think there's a country in the world that's better situated because of our abundant fossil fuels that we have today, because of our commitment to the rule of law, because of our commitment to innovation, because we are not as corrupt as a lot of the countries that we're dealing with, and because we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which had $270 billion of tax credits in it to drive innovation in the American economy. Because of all those things taken together, I am so happy to live in this country because we can lead that transition and we can compete with China. We can outcompete China. But into this sunny picture came the Biden administration, an administration that I generally support, but they, a few months ago, decided that they were going to begin an investigation into where certain solar panels came from. And the presiding officer and I and some other places said, hold on a second, we haven't made the transition yet. We haven't done it yet. It's going to take us 2 to 3 years to set up these manufacturing plants to build solar panels here, make them here, so we can compete with China on that. In the meantime, we got tens of thousands of people that are swinging hammers in Nevada and Colorado and all across this country that are climbing ladders and getting up on roofs to install solar panels, to make sure that we are driving away from our reliance on fossil fuels and into a world where we're relying on wind and sun. And the minute that the Biden administration did this, companies in Colorado started to say, we're going to go out of business. Companies in Nevada and New Mexico said, we're going out of business. The capital that was investing in them went away. This isn't hypothetical. This was happening. They were saying to me, and I know they were saying to the presiding officer, we are going to go bankrupt as a result of this policy. We are going bankrupt as a result of this policy. We can't sell enough solar panels here in America. We can't install enough solar panels. We can't hire enough people. And now our own country is saying, we're going to bring this to an end. And we went to the White House and we said, we can't do this to tens of thousands of people all across our country. We can't do this if you're committed to fighting climate change. We can't do this if you're committed to the union workers that are installing all of this plant all over the United States. And I remember a phone call with the presiding officer with the White House where I said, this is a matter of days, not months. And to their credit, they came back and they said, you guys were right. We need to put a moratorium in place. And we need to have 2 years where we can have a transition to give us the chance to start manufacturing these panels here in America. Amazing to have people that strategic in our democracy. To be able to say, you know what, we passed a law, the Inflation Reduction Act, that's going to put us in the position of being able to manufacture these solar panels here, which Ronald Reagan and all those people should never have sent to China to begin with. So we're going to bring them back. But it's going to take us a little time. And in the meantime, we're going to adopt a set of policies that are going to allow the small businesses that are installing solar all over Nevada, all over Colorado, all over this country. We're going to not just allow them, we're going to celebrate the fact that they're there, and we're going to support them. We're going to give them notice And we are going to act strategically with respect to our competition with China. And that's what we did. The combination of that moratorium and the Inflation Reduction Act, that's probably the most strategic we've been around here in decades. In decades. And now comes the senator from Florida who says, I'm going to blow this up. I'm going to compete with China by destroying the solar industry in the United States. I'm going to compete with China by putting tens of thousands of people that are now working on the unemployment rolls. I'm going to compete with China, the senator from Florida says, by putting a $1 billion retroactive tax on the solar industry in Nevada, in Colorado, and all across the United States of America. That doesn't sound like competing to China. That sounds like surrender to me. That sounds like waving the white flag to me. And in all the history of self-inflicted wounds around here, the debt ceiling being just the latest example, and don't get me started on that, although I will just say parenthetically, why anybody in this chamber or in that chamber would think this is the moment in American history to raise interest rates on the American people, on home buyers and on people that have car loans and people that are paying their student debt, I don't know. But that's not the topic we're here today. But it is just, it's almost as nuts, especially when the status quo is going to be so great for America, because the status quo is we're going to spend the next 2 years continuing to install solar panels. We're going to spend the next 2 years standing up manufacturing all across the United States of America. I hope a bunch of that's going to be in Colorado. So we're building and manufacturing these solar panels here. And so what I would say is, if you are voting with the senator from Florida, don't do it because you're competing somehow with the Chinese. You're surrendering to the Chinese. And if you're doing it because you think that we got taken to the cleaners by the Chinese in terms of the manufacturing of solar panels to begin with, I acknowledge that. But that wasn't the Biden administration's fault. They're the ones that are trying to bring it back. They're the ones that are bringing it back, just like we were the ones that brought the semiconductor industry back here. And we have an incredible opportunity to go forward here to grow the industry that we have and to lead the world, as I said, in this transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. There is no country in the world that is better situated than the United States of America to lead that transition, because of who we are, because of the natural resources that we have, and because of the bill that the presiding officer and I voted for. And we shouldn't upset that. We shouldn't change that. And so I would encourage every single senator in this chamber, whether Democrats or Republicans, to vote down this bill in the name of the competition that we're in with China, to vote down this bill in the name of working people in this country, to vote down this bill in the name of our kids and grandkids who hopefully are going to benefit from our leadership and the strategy that we've been pursuing to make this transition. And let's agree together that we can find much more constructive ways to compete with our adversaries around the world. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for your leadership on this issue, and thank you for giving me a few minutes to talk today. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.